Hello, thank you for joining us. We're going to begin the presentation in about 1 minute. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. Thank you. Again, if you're just joining us, we're going to begin the presentation in about 30 seconds. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. All right, thank you for joining us. My name is Sean Donahue. I'm a Salesforce administration and licensing expert here at Miro Consulting. And this presentation is 8 ways you're overspending on Salesforce. Are you paying for licenses or features that you're not really using? So before I begin, just want to let you know who we are so you understand who you're getting the information from. Miro Consulting is a leading global provider of software asset management and subscription management services for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon Web Services, and of course, Salesforce, which is why you're here. We basically specialize in license and subscription management, audit advisory, negotiation tactics, support management, and cloud services. Essentially, what we do is we help you maximize your return on investment on software license and subscriptions. We help you stay in compliance, and we help you successfully negotiate good contracts and audit settlements. And the best part about working with us is there's no risk. We have a performance guarantee, is that our amount of our cost savings we uncover will be more than our fees. We're the only software licensing organization that makes that claim. So let's talk about what we're going to go over today. Essentially, we're going to talk about active users who aren't really active at all, unassigned user licenses, unused feature licenses, underactive users, over-licensed users, non-user usage fees, adoption and rollout failures, and renewal mistakes. So the way we have to begin this discussion is, what exactly is an active user? So this is the common scenario we see with our clients, where there will be a miscommunication between procurement and IT teams, between sales teams, marketing teams, where not everybody is using the right definition of the term. So perfect example is during a renewal, Salesforce proposes that you increase your licenses from 1,000 to 1,500. And your procurement asks your IT department, how many active users do we have? And IT says, oh, we have 950. So procurement thinks, okay, great. If we're almost out of licenses, we think we're going to grow next year, over the next few years, term of the contract. Let's buy those extra 500 licenses. But in reality, 400 of those active users rarely logged in, if ever. And they don't do much when they do log in. So how did that miscommunication happen? Well, it happens because there really actually is no official Salesforce definition of an active user. So what it really means is it means that there's a checkbox on the user's profile, and if checked, it means they're active. It basically means that they have the ability to log in, unless you've prevented it somehow. And it means you can assign ownership of things like accounts and contacts to that person if they are active. That's basically it. What does it not mean? So what it doesn't mean is it doesn't mean they've ever actually viewed, created, or edited any records at all. They may not have logged in for years. They may not no longer work at your organization. In fact, you can have active users who've never actually logged into the system once, ever. Believe it or not, those users are still considered active if they have the box checked. So you might say, why would I have active users who aren't really active? Well, there's a couple common reasons. One is you have too many licenses. You have so many licenses that you don't need, that you have them assigned to people who aren't using them. You might have a unused user license. So you may have user licenses that simply never got assigned to anyone or aren't right now. And you may have unused, believe it or not, unused licensing, we find, is the #1 way people waste money on Salesforce, because obviously if you're not using the license at all, you're getting no return on your investment for that purchase. So you might say, why? How could I end up with unused user licenses? Well, the most common reason is rollout and adoption delays and failures. So essentially, you purchase Salesforce, you had this idea of how quickly it was going to take to get your users onboarded, get them trained, customize the system, all that kind of thing, and it didn't go as planned. It didn't get developed as quickly as it needed to be developed. There were conflicts with your team on how it was going to be developed. There could be conflicts on what it was connected to, and that could cause, there's a whole bunch of reasons to cause delays. One of the most common reasons we find for those adoption failures and delays is a company will go out and spend a lot of money on Salesforce, and then they don't hire a competent administrator. They'll hire somebody who's maybe used it once or twice, or someone who is a low-level user, and say, okay, please roll this out to our whole company. And things go wrong, licenses go unused. One of the other reasons you might have too many licenses, simply your Salesforce rep dangled a very big discount in front of you and said, well, you could buy that many licenses, but if you buy more, I'll sell them to you at a lesser cost. You can get a price break for a larger purchase. And it turns out that you really didn't need that many licenses. One thing I can assure you is nobody is more enthusiastic about the success of your business than Salesforce. They always think you're going to grow. They always think you're doing great. They always think you should buy more. You may be nothing of the sort, be nobody's fault at all. You may have an experience of change in business conditions that essentially meant maybe your company shrank, maybe you merged with another group, maybe a certain thing your company's not doing anymore. That could be the reason you have extra licenses. And it could be something extremely silly, like your reps keep buying more that they don't, or excuse me, your IT people or your procurement people, whoever your administrators are buying licenses they don't actually need. Because a lot of people don't know, but you can actually, your reps, if it's enabled, your IT people, usually, if it's enabled, can go in and purchase licenses through Salesforce without approval from anybody on your team, if you haven't set up any approval processes. Give you an example of how we've seen this happen is where a company had a process where they were basically at their limit for licenses. So they had a process where every time a new person was onboarded, the person who was doing the onboarded, their instructions said, buy this user a license so we can onboard them. Well, the company did a renewal, purchased more licenses, didn't need to do that anymore, but nobody told the guy that he shouldn't do that as part of his process. So they kept buying more licenses when they already had some that they weren't using. So if that is something that you were unaware of, you're in procurement, you're in legal, something like that, be aware that your users who have the right permissions can just buy more licenses through the Salesforce interface without getting approvals. So what I like to talk about here is the hidden cost of unused licenses. So we'll take a look at these two companies, Company A and Company B. So Company A was tempted by the big discount. They were offered 50% if they purchased 1,000 licenses or to whatever the next block is. So these are, by the way, these are just made up numbers in terms of licenses costs and things like that. So it just makes the math easier to illustrate a point. So let's say the license price for Company A, once they're all in and they've got their regular license, they've got all their add-ons that they wanted to put in there, all the extra features, came out to $200 a license. So the Salesforce rep says, hey, if you buy 1,000 licenses, I'll give you a purchase price, a discount of 50%. Now, the company may not have thought, hey, we only need 500 to 1,000 licenses, but let's get the full 1,000, and then we get the big discount. So they ended up paying $100,000 for those licenses. And Company B, on the other hand, they weren't tempted. They looked at the usage they were going to do, and they thought, well, 500 to 1,000 licenses, let's just stick with the 500 for now, and we'll get more if we need them. Obviously, we'll pay a little bit more money per license, but that's a safer bet. So at the end of the day, the total price at first is very different, $75,000 versus $100,000. But let's talk about how many they actually used. So what's important to understand here is your actual license price is really based on the amount of licenses you use, not the licenses you purchase. So if both organizations only end up using those 500 licenses, the real price per license for Company A is actually about $200, where the real price per license for Company B, who bought less, ends up only being $150. And that's one of the things I want you to understand here is your discount is only as good as your usage. If you got a big discount but aren't using what you purchased, you really didn't get a discount at all. And it actually gets worse. Once you factor in the costs that are associated with your total license count, things like support, things like Shield, things like sandboxes, which I didn't have listed here, but they count as well. Those are all based on your total number of users. So at the end of the day, all of a sudden, company A is spending $140,000 on those licenses, whereas company B is only spending 105. So again, the takeaway here is that your license price isn't really the discount you got until after you factor in your usage. So let's talk about underactive users. So what's an example of an underactive user? Well, it could be a user who's never logged in. Like I said earlier, they're active, but very underactive because they never logged in. They may have logged in once. When you rolled out the system, they logged in, they confirmed their email address, and they've never been back since. They might have not have logged in for years. They may only log in to change their password. We've seen clients where they were very proud to know that all their users logged in at least once every 90 days. Until they realized their users were forced to log in every 90 days to change their password, and they never did anything else. You might have a user who occasionally looks at a report. And there are some users you're going to have like this. It's inevitable. We all have those executives who, demand a Salesforce license that they never use. It's pretty universal. We've all got them. But you may also have people who you thought were going to be using it all the time, and they don't do much more than glance at a dashboard once a week. Good way to look at it is users who don't create or edit any data. If they're not creating or edit any data, you might question, do they even really need a license? Could we have gotten the information to them in a different way? Another example with sales teams in particular, so you can look at is, do your sales teams only enter opportunities once the opportunity is closed? So they're not actually tracking any of their opportunities in Salesforce. It's really just a glorified booking tool. That's not getting a very good value for what you're paying. So let's talk about the over-licensed user. So this is typically a user who, when the system was originally purchased, the purchasing team thought, oh, I really should get my users this extra feature and that extra feature. Well, you got to ask yourself, are they actually using those features? Just because you handed the user the ability to do something doesn't mean they're actually doing it. So you'd want to go in and know, what is the usage here? Is my user actually using all these features and add-ons and extras that I purchased for them in addition to their license? So it's not just the license, it's also the add-ons and the features, which could be a waste of money. This typically happens when a user is using a standard user license, and they may not need one. So depending on what objects they need access to, there are other types of licenses available, even custom licenses. So if they only need access as like a developer, they may be able to get away with a custom license. If they're the type of user who only needs access to certain objects, they may also only need a certain type of license, and they don't really actually need to pay for the full thing. And finally, the other ones we see the most often, as like I said, is when they have features and add-ons that you're paying for, they're licensed for, but nobody's using. So some licenses are okay to have extra. One of those is feature licenses, especially the ones that you got for free. So Salesforce will give you certain feature licenses. The most common one is a marketing user, but there are also ones that your technical team would use, like a flow user or a knowledge user if you've got a team that does support in some way, or a service cloud user. Now, not all these are free, but you might need extra and you might have to pay for extra. But a lot of these types of licenses, they come with everybody's Salesforce. A lot of times they give you more than you would ever need, and that's on purpose because it's just, it's more or less about controlling features and less about making any money. So some feature licenses are okay to have extra. It's no big deal. Some, the ones you're paying for, you really don't want to waste the money on them if you're not using them. If you're not sure, if you have those, check your company information page in Salesforce, and it will show you if you have, excuse me, unassigned licenses. And as I said, it's perfectly normal for some feature licenses. So let's talk about what is not a user license and not a feature license. So essentially, if it's not a user license and it's not a feature license, it's probably an add-on license. There are many, 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 many of them. There is an 80-page booklet you can get from Salesforce that has all of the extra feature licenses. They include things like CPQ, service location, Einstein, lightning dialer, and as I said, 80 pages more of them. So if you ever want to know, like, what is a feature license. If you're looking at your system and you're looking at certain features, one of the nice things about this Salesforce pricing guide for this comes from Salesforce itself. They give you both the feature, the add-on, what it does, and what its list price is. And that's definitely something you want to look into, because very frequently add-ons are purchased after the initial contract, and very frequently they're given with no discount whatsoever. So don't assume when you look at a feature license that if you purchased it, you got the same discount for that feature, for that add-on, as you did for the add-ons. Where you may have gotten a discount on your regular user licenses, if you purchased your add-ons after or even at the time, don't assume you got that same discount on your add-on licenses. It's more likely that you did not. Again, if you think you have these and you're not using them, or you just want to know, check your company's sales information page to see what you've got. So why do? We mentioned earlier, one of the most common reasons Salesforce clients end up with unused licenses or over licensed users is because they had an adoption and rollout failure. The most common reason that adoption and rollout failures happen is because companies will purchase a large Salesforce installation organization and then hire someone not unqualified, just not qualified enough to effectively understand the challenges rolling it out to a large organization. As I said, they could be many. They could be things that problems with importing data from legacy systems, problems with security, problems with just generally getting their users to adopt the system, to start putting information into the system. If you have a company culture where they're not used to being reported on, they're not used to entering this amount of data, that can be one of the reasons. And it could be some situations where the implementation's bad and you have bad processes that take a long time and your users just go, I don't have time for this. And one of the other common ones is you overestimated your needs in terms of your company growth, your company adoption. You overestimated how fast you were going to you underestimated how fast you were going to develop and customize the application for your specific needs. And training's the other big one. If you don't train people how to use it, you shouldn't expect them to use it. And one of the other largest ones is, of course, lack from buy-in from stakeholders. If a unit has a leader who isn't pushing their team to adopt Salesforce, and the team thinks, well, I don't have to, this is optional, a lot of times they won't. So the most common mistake, besides purchasing too many things, is renewing in a way that is not beneficial for your company. So the most common renewal mistakes we see organizations, they wait too long to start. If you're waiting until 3 months or 6 months before the contract is up, Salesforce knows they have you. Salesforce knows how long it takes companies to migrate away. They know what migration activity looks like. So if you do nothing for a long time, they know that they can up price on you at renewal because you're not going anywhere. Because you didn't give yourself enough time to even think about it. Another big one is underestimating the uplift costs. And the one I want to give you an example here is, if this is your first renewal, you purchased for the first time, last contract, that first contract you signed is coming up for renewal, you should expect a significant uplift cost in most scenarios. Now, you're going to be paying, if yours is in the future from now, you've got a 9% uplift baked in. Salesforce has announced that to everyone. So if you haven't heard, expect at least a 9% increase in your uplift costs. But if you signed a sweetheart deal and you got about a 50% discount, don't be surprised if all of a sudden your renewal comes in and you're only getting a 25% discount off your original price, because Salesforce will discount greatly to get that first contract signed. And then their philosophy is land and expand. So they'll get that first contract signed, they'll get you locked into the system, and then once they realize you're not going anywhere, they know they can raise prices on you. And another big mistake is not measuring how much you're using the system. So a lot of times companies think they're getting much more value out of a Salesforce installation than they actually are. In fact, they end up thinking, oh, well, my team uses it every day, my team's logging in every day, we're producing lots of reports, things like that, when in reality, you're not actually using it much at all. Usage is actually a very difficult thing to measure in your Salesforce organization, but keep in mind, Salesforce knows exactly how much usage you're getting. Salesforce is completely aware of the amount of activity, the amount of logins, all that kind of stuff. They're going to look at that, and they're going to take that into consideration when they're planning out your renewal for them. They're going to understand that. So if you're getting very active usage, great, but expect that Salesforce is going to know. But on the other side, if you're not getting a lot of usage, you can use that when you negotiate with Salesforce and say, hey, we're just not using this very much. Here's the evidence. Here's the proof. That Salesforce rep will take that into consideration. It's one of the very few things you can use for leverage. A lot of companies mistake. They assume they're going to have great future growth. So they buy for the future instead of the present, and the future doesn't happen. Big mistake is not having a plan B. You've always got to expect or prepare for Salesforce to come back at list price. That's like the worst case scenario. Is they say, you know what, you don't get a discount anymore. We're moving you to list price, and that's it. Well, if that's not affordable for your organization or not acceptable, you should have a plan B. You really shouldn't bluff Salesforce because they know. So one thing not to do is tell your Salesforce rep, give me this pricing and we're migrating. Your Salesforce rep knows completely whether you're about to migrate or not. So if you're not actually migrating, you haven't taken any steps to, don't try to tell Salesforce you will. They won't believe you. You don't want to have missing terms and conditions. So there are very important terms and conditions we recommend for all organizations. And it's not just the ones we recommend for everybody. You may have terms and conditions in your original contract that simply by mistake get left out of your renewal. So it's one thing that's very important. If you negotiated something very specific that's not in the standard language, that's very important to you, make sure it's there in your renewal contract. Because we've seen things get dropped that are very important to organizations. And Salesforce, of course, will give you those terms back for a price. Not knowing or having leverage. So one of the ways people think they have leverage is they say, oh, well, I'm going to purchase something new with Salesforce, and that'll help me get a discount. Well, that all depends on what you're purchasing. If you're purchasing something Salesforce really wants to sell right now, so for example, I give you one, the example I would give you be MuleSoft. If they really want to sell that, yeah, you probably will have that as leverage. But if you're buying something old and boring that maybe Salesforce has, they've had it forever, they don't really care about it anymore, they're in the process of replacing it with something else anyway, they're not going to tell you that, but you won't get a discount if it's not something that is on their incentivized to sell. Another big mistake is getting rushed into early renewal. So one of the most common Salesforce tactics is they will about 3 months before your actual renewal, which will, if your renewal's in the second quarter, they'll come to you the first quarter and say, hey, we've got a sweetheart deal for you, but it's only available for 2 weeks. Make a decision. And of course, they're not doing anything nefarious. They're just trying to push you into an earlier quarter to make their numbers. But a lot of times organizations, executives, decision makers, that puts them in a bind. And they think, oh my God, if I don't take this deal, what's the one I'm going to get at renewal? So that can be a way that Salesforce tries to rush you into a decision, and it happens more and more. And of course, the biggest one, if you have no software asset management policy. If Salesforce is calling into your organization and basically saying, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you going to renew? Are you going anywhere? And if you've got some manager or some administrator who knows everything but doesn't know not to talk and says, oh yeah, we're not going anywhere. We have no plans to migrate. Yeah, we're also thinking about purchasing this other product. Yeah, that's really bad, because that person is taking away every bit of leverage you have. So number one thing of a software asset management policy is only authorized people at your organization are allowed to talk to the vendor. So tell them, hey, if you get a call and they're just chit-chatting with you and asking a lot of questions, you're not supposed to say anything to them. You're not supposed to give them information that will hurt your negotiation. So here are your key takeaways. Start planning 12 months early. You really want to do this and do this right and give yourself options. You want to start about 12 months early. Again, I talked about us having a software asset management policy. Again, know your usage. Know if you're actually using all these different pieces that you purchased, and not just is it turned on, is it turned off. You want to have an actual idea of counts. Like it should be a number. I've made this many of this, or I've done this over time. That's the kind of thing you want to know. You want to know what you're paying for. So take a very close look at that contract. Make sure that everything on that contract is what you actually asked for. And make sure that it all got rolled out. Sometimes Salesforce occasionally forgets to give you something. More often, your team will not realize that something you purchased needs to be separately installed. So they don't see it. They don't know they're supposed to install it, so it never gets deployed. So that's another important one. You should have a plan B in case Salesforce puts a number in front of you that is either unaffordable or unacceptable. And most importantly, hire a software licensing expert. Don't go it alone. think about it like this: when you're negotiating with Salesforce, you're negotiating with the best sales negotiation team in the world, who's informed by the intelligence of the largest sales CRM organization in the world. They look at everybody, so they definitely have done this many, 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 many more times than you have. So it's better to get the experts who've also done it many, many, many times. And with that, I will open the floor to questions. Let me open my question box here. Second. Oops. All right. So ask if anybody put in the question box. Yes, we do have one question. The person who asked that question, can you give me what those initials stand for, so that I have a better idea of what you're speaking about? But the most common question I tend to get is, hey, I just signed a big deal with Salesforce. I bought 1,000 licenses, and I'm not going to need any of them. We just had big layoffs. We have, laid off 250 people. Can I just trade? Can I give these licenses back to Salesforce? Can I downsize in the middle of my contract? The answer is no, you can't. The only way to get out of a contract with Salesforce is to file for bankruptcy. And that is essentially something, thankfully, none of the clients we've had to work with have ever done, but that's your only real choice. So I'm being asked about a certain specific product. Let me get back to you after the event, because that is something that most users, wouldn't understand. So we'll take care of it. We'll call you after the event. I'll give it one more moment here. Does anybody have any further questions that they would like to know? Any tricks that you thought about? No? All right. Well, great. If you have any questions you didn't think of and you wanted to ask us, please let us know. And we will get back to you. Well, I will reach out to you, or one of our other analysts will reach out to you. And like I said at the beginning, if you have any other concerns about any other vendors like Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, or AWS, and you would also like help with your software licensing for those vendors, we help with that too. That concludes the webinar. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a great day.